The year was 1967, and Master Takeshi Yamamoto had been running his small karate dojo in downtown Phoenix, Arizona for 3 years. The wooden floors creaked under the weight of his students as they practiced their kata in perfect synchronization. The afternoon sun streamed through the single window, casting long shadows across the training area where 20 students moved in disciplined harmony. Master Yamamoto was a traditionalist. Born in Okinawa, he had studied under some of the greatest karate masters before coming to America in 1964. His dojo followed strict Japanese customs. Students bowed when entering, addressed him as sensei, and showed absolute respect for the ranking system. The white walls were adorned with calligraphy scrolls, and the smell of incense mixed with perspiration created an atmosphere of reverence and dedication. That Tuesday evening, as Master Yamamoto prepared for the advanced class, the front door swung open with unusual force. A tall, muscular young man with sandy brown hair walked in wearing torn blue jeans and a plain white t-shirt. His work boots left muddy prints on the sacred training floor. This was Jake Morrison, a 22-year-old construction worker who had heard about the dojo from friends at the local bar. "You teach fighting here?" Jake asked, his voice carrying across the quiet dojo. Several black belt students stopped their warm-up exercises and turned to stare at the newcomer. Master Yamamoto approached slowly, his weathered face maintaining its customary calm expression. "This is a place of learning, young man. We teach Karate-Do, the way of the empty hand. But first you must show proper respect," Master Yamamoto replied in accented English, gesturing toward the front of the dojo, where a small shrine sat beneath the American and Japanese flags. Jake looked around the room, taking in the bowing students and the formal atmosphere. His experiences growing up in rough neighborhoods had taught him that respect was earned through strength, not ceremony. "Look, old man, I just want to learn how to fight better. I don't need all this bowing and scraping stuff." The dojo fell completely silent. Even the sounds from the busy street outside seemed to fade away. Master Yamamoto's students had never witnessed such disrespect toward their beloved teacher. The master himself stood perfectly still, his dark eyes studying the young American with a mixture of disappointment and curiosity. "In my dojo, all students must bow upon entering and show proper respect to the art and to their teacher. This is not negotiable," Master Yamamoto stated firmly, his voice remaining calm despite the obvious insult. Jake crossed his arms over his chest, his jaw set in defiance. "I came here to learn to fight, not to worship some old traditions that don't mean anything in the real world. If you can't handle that, maybe I should find somewhere else to train." The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Several of the black belt students took half steps forward, their faces showing anger at Jake's continued disrespect. But Master Yamamoto raised a gentle hand, stopping them from intervening. Something about this brash young American intrigued him. Perhaps beneath the arrogance lay a lesson waiting to be learned. "Very well," Master Yamamoto said quietly. "You may stay for tonight's class, but understand that in my dojo, respect is not optional. It is the foundation upon which all true martial arts are built. Perhaps you will learn this in time." Jake shrugged and walked to the edge of the training area, ignoring the hostile stares from the other students. He had no intention of bowing to anyone, but he was curious to see what this old Japanese man could teach him about fighting. Little did he know that his refusal to show traditional respect would lead to one of the most important lessons of his life. As the class began with the customary bow, Jake remained standing straight, his arms at his sides, while every other student in the dojo bowed deeply to their master. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge both the teacher's wisdom and the students' understanding of what true honor really meant. The evening class proceeded with mechanical precision, despite the tension in the air. Master Yamamoto led the students through basic kata, their synchronized movements creating a rhythmic sound of bare feet sliding across the wooden floor. Jake watched from the corner, his arms still crossed, studying every technique with the analytical mind of someone who had survived countless street fights in the working-class neighborhoods of Phoenix. The other students stole glances at the disrespectful newcomer, their concentration broken by his continued defiance. When Master Yamamoto called for partner exercises, nobody volunteered to work with Jake. The master quietly paired him with Robert Chen, a second-degree black belt who had been training for 5 years since returning from military service in Vietnam. "We will practice basic blocking techniques," Master Yamamoto announced to the class. "Remember, in Karate-Do, defense is as important as attack. A strong defense reveals character, while flashy attacks often hide weakness. Robert demonstrated the proper stance and showed Jake how to execute a basic inside block. His movements were fluid and precise, each technique performed with the quiet confidence that came from years of disciplined training. "Like this," Robert said patiently. "Step forward with your left foot and bring your left arm across your body to deflect the attack." Jake mimicked the movement, but with obvious impatience. "This is too slow," he complained, his voice carrying across the dojo. "In a real fight, you don't have time for all these fancy movements. You just hit first and hit hard." Master Yamamoto approached the pair, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. The years of training had given him the ability to move silently across the floor, appearing beside students without warning. "Mr. Morrison, may I ask about your fighting experience?" he inquired with genuine curiosity. "I've been in plenty of scraps," Jake replied, his chest puffing with pride. "Never lost one either. Grew up in the rough part of town, where you learn to take care of yourself, or get eaten alive. Don't need any of this ceremonial stuff to know how to handle myself." The master nodded thoughtfully, then turned to address the entire class. "Class, please gather around. I think it would be educational for everyone to see a demonstration of different fighting philosophies." The students formed a circle on the training mat, their faces showing mixture of excitement and apprehension. Master Yamamoto gestured for Jake to stand in the center. "Mr. Morrison, would you be willing to demonstrate your fighting style against Robert? Just light contact, of course." Jake's eyes lit up with the prospect of proving his point. Finally, some real action, instead of all this bowing and slow-motion dancing. He rolled his shoulders and cracked his knuckles, falling into a boxer's stance he had learned watching fights at the local gym. Robert moved to the opposite side of the circle and bowed deeply to his opponent, then to Master Yamamoto. Jake remained standing straight, his fists raised in a traditional Western boxing guard. The contrast between the two men was striking. Robert's calm, centered posture versus Jake's aggressive, forward-leaning stance. "Begin when ready," Master Yamamoto said quietly. Stepping back to observe, Jake immediately charged forward, throwing a hard right cross aimed at Robert's head. His movement was fast and powerful, backed by years of construction work that had developed impressive upper body strength. But Robert simply shifted his weight, turned his body 45 degrees, and let the punch slide harmlessly past his shoulder. Before Jake could recover his balance, Robert's left hand gently guided Jake's extended arm further in the direction it was already going. Jake stumbled forward, his momentum carrying him past his target. Robert could have easily struck Jake's exposed back, but instead he simply stepped away and returned to his ready position. "What the hell was that?" Jake demanded, spinning around to face his opponent. His face was flushed with embarrassment and anger. "You didn't even try to fight back." "I did not need to," Robert replied calmly. "Your own force defeated you. This is one of the fundamental principles Master Yamamoto teaches us. Sometimes the strongest defense is to simply not be where the attack expects you to be." Jake attacked again, this time with a combination of punches. But each strike met only empty air, as Robert seemed to flow like water around the aggressive assault. The more force Jake used, the more unbalanced he became when his attacks found no target. After 30 seconds of fruitless aggression, Jake was breathing hard while Robert appeared completely relaxed. Master Yamamoto called for them to stop. "Thank you both," he said, bowing to each fighter. "Class, what did you observe during this demonstration?" An advanced student raised her hand. "Sensei, I noticed that the harder Jake tried to hit Robert, the more he left himself open to counterattack. But Robert never took advantage of those openings." "Excellent observation, Sarah. Robert-san could have ended this encounter many times, but he chose restraint. This demonstrates one of Karate-do's highest principles, the ability to win without destroying your opponent," Master Yamamoto explained, his eyes studying Jake's frustrated expression. Jake stood in the center of the circle, his hands on his hips, trying to process what had just happened. For the first time in his adult life, his aggressive approach to confrontation had been completely neutralized without his opponent even appearing to try. The realization was both humbling and intriguing. As the class continued, Master Yamamoto had Jake participate in various exercises designed to teach the fundamental principles of traditional karate. Unlike the quick demonstration with Robert, these drills were methodical and demanding, requiring patience and repetition that tested Jake's willingness to learn. The master paired Jake with different partners for basic blocking and striking exercises. Each technique was broken down into its component parts: proper stance, correct hand position, timing, and breath control. Jake found himself struggling with concepts that seemed foreign to his aggressive fighting style. In Karate-Do, we do not fight against our opponent, Master Yamamoto explained, as he corrected Jake's stance for the 5th time. We fight against our own limitations, our own ego, our own impatience. The opponent is merely a mirror that shows us where we need to improve. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead, frustrated by his inability to execute the seemingly simple techniques correctly. His construction work had given him physical strength, but these movements required a different kind of coordination, one that came from mental discipline rather than brute force. "This is ridiculous," Jake muttered under his breath as he attempted a basic kata movement for the 10th time. "All this slow-motion stuff won't help in a real fight where everything happens fast." Master Yamamoto overheard the comment and approached quietly. "Mr. Morrison, may I share a story with you?" he asked, his voice carrying the patience of someone who had taught hundreds of students over the years. Jake shrugged, grateful for a break from the repetitive exercises. The other students continued their practice, but several listened as their master began to speak. "When I was a young man in Okinawa before the war, I too was impatient with traditional training methods. I wanted to learn quickly, to become strong immediately. My teacher, Master Chibana, was very old and moved very slowly. I thought he was weak because his movements seemed so gentle." Master Yamamoto paused, his eyes distant with memory. "One day, some American sailors came to our village. They had been drinking and were causing trouble, pushing around the local people. I was young and hot-headed, so I decided to show them what Okinawan karate could do. I challenged the biggest one to fight." Jake leaned forward, his interest genuinely captured for the first time since entering the dojo. This was the kind of story he could relate to. Real conflict, real consequences. "I used all the powerful techniques I had learned, all the fast combinations I had practiced, and I lost, badly. The sailor was bigger, stronger, and more experienced in rough fighting than I was. I ended up unconscious in the dirt, humiliated in front of my entire village," Master Yamamoto continued, his voice steady despite the painful memory. "When I recovered, I expected Master Chibana to be disappointed in me, maybe even to dismiss me from training. Instead, he took me to the beach where we sat and watched the waves crash against the rocks. He asked me, 'Takeshi, which is stronger, the wave that crashes loudly against the rock, or the tide that slowly shapes the entire coastline?' Jake found himself genuinely curious about the answer, though he would not admit it openly. The master's storytelling had a hypnotic quality that drew him in, despite his initial skepticism. "The wave makes more noise and seems more powerful in the moment," Master Yamamoto continued, "but the tide changes the very shape of the land itself. Master Chibana taught me that true strength comes not from the force of impact, but from the consistency of purpose. The techniques we practice slowly and repeatedly become instinctive and natural when speed is required." As if to demonstrate his point, Master Yamamoto asked Jake to throw a slow punch toward his chest. When Jake complied, the master's response was so fluid and effortless that Jake's punch was redirected before he even realized it had been touched. The movement was barely visible, yet completely effective. "You see, Mr. Morrison, what appears slow in practice becomes invisible in application, but this takes years of patient development. There are no shortcuts to genuine skill." For the first time since entering the dojo, Jake found himself without a quick retort. The demonstration had been so subtle, so effortless, that it challenged everything he thought he knew about fighting. His street experience had taught him that the loudest, most aggressive approach usually won. But here was evidence of something different. A quiet power that operated by completely different rules. As the class wound down, Master Yamamoto led the students through a final bow. This time, Jake hesitated for a long moment before giving a slight, almost imperceptible nod of his head. It was not the deep, respectful bow that tradition demanded, but it was the first crack in his armor of defiance. The other students began filing out of the dojo, many of them stealing glances at the newcomer who had challenged their master's authority. Jake remained standing in the center of the training area, his mind churning with conflicting thoughts about what he had experienced. "Mr. Morrison," Master Yamamoto called softly as Jake started toward the door. The dojo is open every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday evening. You are welcome to return if you wish to continue learning. Jake paused at the doorway, his hand on the frame. I'll think about it, he replied, his voice lacking its earlier arrogance. As he stepped into the Arizona evening, the warm desert air carried the sound of traffic and distant music from the bars where his friends would be gathering. But for the first time in years, those familiar distractions seemed less appealing than the quiet mysteries he had encountered in the small karate dojo. 3 weeks passed before Jake Morrison returned to Master Yamamoto's dojo. During that time, he found himself replaying the events of that first evening repeatedly in his mind. His friends at the construction site and local bars had laughed when he told them about the old Japanese man who could fight without seeming to move, but Jake could not shake the memory of Robert's effortless defense or the master's quiet wisdom. On a humid Thursday evening in late July 1967, Jake stood outside the dojo's front door, his hand hesitating on the handle. Through the window, he could see the students practicing their kata in perfect synchronization, their white uniforms moving like waves across the wooden floor, the familiar sounds of bare feet sliding across wood, and the occasional sharp exhale of students executing techniques drew him in despite his lingering pride. This time, when Jake entered the dojo, he paused at the threshold. Master Yamamoto looked up from correcting a student's stance, and their eyes met across the training area. Without a word, Jake gave a slight bow, deeper than his previous grudging nod, though still far from the respectful greeting that tradition demanded. "Welcome back, Mr. Morrison," Master Yamamoto said quietly, his voice carrying no trace of surprise or judgment. "Please change into training clothes. We are working on basic combinations this evening." Jake had purchased a simple white karate uniform from a sporting goods store, along with a white belt that felt foreign around his waist. As he changed in the small dressing room, he could hear the rhythmic counting of techniques being practiced in the main training area. The numbers were called out in Japanese: ichi, ni, san, she, a language that was becoming familiar through repetition. When he emerged, Master Yamamoto paired him with Susan Martinez, a brown belt who had been training for 3 years. Susan was a school teacher in her late 20s, patient and methodical in her approach to the martial arts. Her movements lacked the flashy power that Jake associated with fighting, but they possessed a precision and control that he was beginning to appreciate. "Tonight we practice basic combination techniques," Susan explained as she demonstrated a simple sequence: front punch, reverse punch, front kick. "The key is to maintain proper form throughout the entire combination, not to rush through the movements." Jake attempted to follow her example, but his natural inclination was to speed up and use more force than necessary. His punches were powerful but uncontrolled, his kicks high but unbalanced. After several repetitions, sweat dripped from his forehead, despite the relatively simple nature of the exercises. "Slow down," Susan advised gently. "In traditional karate, we believe that if you cannot perform a technique slowly and correctly, you cannot perform it quickly and correctly. Speed without control is just flailing." Master Yamamoto approached during a brief rest period. "Mr. Morrison, I notice you are working very hard. This is good. But may I ask what you hope to gain from karate training?" Jake wiped his face with a towel, considering his answer carefully. 3 weeks of reflection had given him time to examine his motivations more honestly. "I came here thinking I just wanted to get better at fighting," he admitted. "But after what happened with Robert, and listening to your story about the waves and the tide, I'm not sure what I want anymore." The master nodded approvingly. "This confusion is the beginning of wisdom. When a student thinks they know everything, they cannot learn anything new. When they admit they know nothing, every moment becomes a lesson." As the evening progressed, Jake noticed changes in his own attitude that surprised him. He found himself listening more carefully to instructions, watching other students to see how they executed techniques, and accepting corrections without the defensive anger that had characterized his first visit. During partner practice, when Susan gently corrected his stance for the 4th time, Jake felt his old impulse to snap back with a defensive comment. Instead, he took a breath and adjusted his position as she suggested. The small act of accepting guidance felt strange and uncomfortable, like wearing shoes on the wrong feet. "Better," Susan said with a smile. "Your balance is much more solid now. Can you feel the difference?" To his surprise, Jake could feel the difference. The corrected stance provided a more stable platform for his techniques, making his movements more efficient and controlled. It was a small revelation that traditional forms served practical purposes, even if those purposes were not immediately obvious. Near the end of class, Master Yamamoto called all students to the front of the dojo for a brief meditation period. They knelt in Caesar position, a formal sitting posture that Jake found physically uncomfortable but mentally calming. The master spoke about the importance of developing inner stillness as a foundation for external technique. In Karate-do, we seek to unify the body, mind, and spirit, he said in his measured cadence. Physical techniques are only the external expression of internal discipline. True strength comes not from the muscles, but from the character of the person using those muscles. As the class concluded with the customary bow, Jake found himself participating more naturally in the ritual. His bow was still shorter and less formal than those of his classmates, but it carried genuine respect rather than grudging compliance. "Mr. Morrison," Master Yamamoto said, as the other students began filing out, "would you mind staying for a few minutes? I would like to discuss your training." Jake nodded, his stomach tightening with familiar anxiety. Throughout his life, requests to stay after had usually meant trouble. But as the dojo emptied and Master Yamamoto began straightening training equipment, the atmosphere felt more like a conversation between equals than a disciplinary meeting. "I have been teaching karate for many years," the master began, "and I have learned to recognize different types of students. Some come seeking physical fitness, others want to learn self-defense, and still others are drawn by the traditional culture of the martial arts." Jake waited, uncertain where the conversation was heading, but no longer defensive about the direction it might take. "But occasionally, I encounter a student who comes seeking something they cannot name. They are often the most challenging students to teach, because they resist the very lessons they most need to learn. But when such students finally open themselves to learning, they often become the most dedicated practitioners." The master's words hung in the air as Jake processed their meaning. For the first time in his adult life, he was being seen not as a problem to be solved or a threat to be contained, but as someone with potential worth developing. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison first entered Master Yamamoto's dojo, and the transformation was evident to everyone who knew him. His construction crew noticed that he no longer picked fights at the local bars. His landlord remarked on how polite he had become, and his own reflection in the mirror showed a man carrying himself with quiet confidence rather than aggressive swagger. The dojo had become Jake's second home. 3 times a week, he practiced the fundamental techniques that had once seemed so foreign and useless. His kata had improved dramatically. His stances had developed the stability that Master Yamamoto emphasized, and his understanding of traditional karate principles had deepened beyond mere physical technique. On a cool February evening in 1968, Jake arrived early for class, as had become his habit. He used the extra time to practice the Heian Kata series that Master Yamamoto had taught him, moving through the forms with a precision and mindfulness that would have been impossible during his first visit. The repetitive movements had become a form of moving meditation, calming his mind and centering his spirit. As other students began arriving, Jake noticed a commotion at the front entrance. 3 young men in leather jackets had entered the dojo without removing their shoes or bowing. Their leader, a stocky man with greased-back hair and a sneer on his face, was demanding to speak with the old Japanese guy. "I heard this place teaches some kind of ancient fighting," the leader announced loudly, his voice echoing off the wooden walls. "Me and my boys here want to see what all the fuss is about. Maybe have ourselves a little demonstration." Master Yamamoto emerged from his office, his expression calm, despite the obvious disrespect being shown. At 72 years old, he moved with the grace of someone half his age, but his peaceful demeanor only seemed to encourage the intruder's arrogance. "Welcome to my dojo," the master said politely, bowing slightly. "If you are interested in learning Karate-do, I would be happy to discuss our training program with you. However, I must ask that you remove your shoes and show proper respect for this place of learning." The leader laughed harshly. "Respect for what? Some old man playing with fancy dance moves? I've been in real fights, Pops. Street fights where the only rule is win or get your face smashed in. Why don't you show us what your ancient wisdom can do against some real violence?" The other students in the dojo had gathered around the edges of the training area, their faces showing a mixture of anger and concern. Jake found himself moving closer to the confrontation, his old instincts awakening despite months of training in self-control and patience. "Sir, I do not wish to fight you," Master Yamamoto replied, his voice remaining steady. Karate-do is not about proving superiority over others. It is about improving oneself. If you are truly interested in learning, you are welcome to observe our class. Otherwise, I must ask you to leave. The leader's face reddened with anger. "You think you're better than me, old man? Think your Japanese mumbo-jumbo makes you some kind of tough guy? Let me show you what real fighting looks like." He swung a wild right hook toward Master Yamamoto's head with the clear intention of causing serious harm. The punch was fast and powerful, thrown with the full weight of his body behind it. But as the fist approached its target, something extraordinary happened. Master Yamamoto seemed to barely move. His body shifted slightly to the left. His right hand came up in a gentle circular motion, and suddenly the attacker was flying through the air. The young man landed hard on the wooden floor. The wind knocked out of him. His expression changed from arrogance to complete bewilderment. "What the hell just happened?" one of his companions asked, taking a step backward. Master Yamamoto had returned to his natural standing position as if nothing had occurred. "In Karate-do, we do not meet force with force," he explained calmly. "We redirect the opponent's energy and use it against them." This young man defeated himself with his own aggression. The leader struggled to his feet, his face now showing genuine fear rather than bravado. "That was some kind of trick," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. His two friends were already backing toward the door. "There was no trick involved," Master Yamamoto replied. "Only the application of principles that any dedicated student can learn. True strength comes from discipline, not aggression. True courage comes from protecting others, not dominating them." As the three intruders retreated hastily from the dojo, Jake realized that he had just witnessed something profound. For months, he had been learning techniques and practicing forms, but only now did he truly understand what Master Yamamoto had been trying to teach him. After the class concluded and the other students had departed, Jake approached his teacher with a deep, respectful bow, the kind of bow he had once refused to give. "Sensei," he said, using the honorary title naturally for the first time, "I owe you an apology." Master Yamamoto looked at his student with kindness. "For what do you apologize, Jake-san?" "When I first came here, I thought respect was something weak people gave to strong people because they were afraid. I thought honor was just pretty words people used to make themselves feel important. But tonight I saw real strength. And it came from your discipline, your self-control, and your genuine desire to avoid harming another person, even when they meant to harm you." The master smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening with genuine warmth. "And what have you learned about honor?" Jake considered the question carefully, drawing on months of reflection and training. "I learned that honor isn't about being tough or proving you're better than someone else. Honor is about becoming the best version of yourself and using that strength to protect and help others. When I refused to bow, I wasn't showing strength. I was showing fear. I was afraid that showing respect would make me weak. And now," Master Yamamoto asked gently, "now I understand that showing respect takes courage. It means putting aside your ego and acknowledging that you have something to learn from someone else. The white belt who refuses to bow isn't teaching the master a lesson. He's refusing to learn the most important lesson of all." Master Yamamoto placed a gentle hand on Jake's shoulder. "Jake-san, you have learned something that many students never discover, even after years of training. You have learned that true martial arts begin with humility and grow through respect. This is the foundation of honor." As they prepared to close the dojo for the evening, Jake helped his teacher arrange the training equipment and sweep the floors. The physical work was simple, but it carried a significance that went far beyond mere chores. It was an expression of gratitude, respect, and commitment to the principles that had transformed his life. Walking out into the Arizona night, Jake Morrison was no longer the same man who had swagger into the dojo 8 months earlier. He had learned that strength without wisdom was merely violence, that pride without humility was merely arrogance, and that true honor could only be earned through the daily practice of respect, discipline, and service to others. The white belt who had refused to bow had indeed taught the master a lesson, not through his defiance, but through his eventual willingness to learn. And in teaching that lesson, he had learned the most important truth of all, that honor is not something you demand from others, but something you cultivate within yourself.